Alright everyone, this is JG, and today I'm doing a deep dive on Wang. Wang is an impressive operator, and if you pulled him, you're going to want to know all about how to use him to the fullest. I'll talk you through the key mechanics in his kit, all three of his skills, and the best ops to pair him with. Let's dive in. Wang is a Trapmaster specialist, so we have to start by talking about how they work. They're ranged units dealing physical damage with a pretty fast attack speed, comparable to a marksman sniper. Although it's not the main thing you care about here, his attack and attack speed are actually very good. Ignoring skills, he can keep up with a comparable sniper in physical damage. The Trapmaster's main shtick is being able to place traps. Wang himself is cheap, at 12 DP, but each trap costs another 3 DP, or 2 with his module. These traps have global range, but with a few restrictions. Trapmasters can't place traps on tiles occupied by enemies, so you have to place them somewhere that you expect enemies to walk in the future, at which point the trap will activate. You can't place traps on high ground tiles because enemies won't walk there. Except, Wang gets to break pretty much every single rule about Trapmasters. He can't place his Wei Chi stone on a tile occupied by an enemy, but when he places one, his talent 1 places a second one. And not only can that one be placed on enemy tiles, it prioritizes placing it on enemy tiles. He can place traps on high ground tiles, because those might be adjacent to enemies that you want to hit with the bonus traps. And S3 just ignores everything at once. Enemies don't even have to step on the trap anymore, they just have to go within 2 tiles of it. And for good measure, he can just start placing traps directly on top of anybody within his expanded attack range. At this point, he's not really setting traps, he's throwing hand grenades. He's about as subtle and strategic as a knife in the eye. Oh well. It's not like his storyline is all about being patient and crafty. I'm sorry, what's that? Okay, I'm hearing that actually, that's kind of his whole thing. Okay then. Let's take a second to walk through this talent 1. When you place a stone manually, he automatically places one adjacent to it if he can, so you essentially get 2 traps for the price of 1. I played with this for a while and determined the rules for the bonus stone. First, prioritize placing it on a tile with an enemy if one is available. Second, prioritize non-deployable tiles first, then low ground tiles, then high ground tiles. Third, prefer the tile to the north, then east, then south, then west. These rules seem to explain the trap placement everywhere I've tested. Traps can't share tiles with other friendly units, so it's possible that the bonus stone can't be placed at all. The next thing to know is that manually placed stones and talent stones are similar but very slightly different. They deal the same amount of damage under the same conditions. Manually placed stones can be retreated if you click on them. Talent stones can't. The only way to remove talent stones without exploding them is to deploy an operator on top of them. Wang can have a max of 6 manually placed stones and 9 talent stones on the map at once. The other thing to know is that his traps actually don't explode on their own. You may have occasionally spotted these weird stones that don't seem to explode when enemies step on them. At first I thought these were a bug, but the talent text mentions stones linking to activate each other. His traps won't actually activate until they've had another stone adjacent to them. It's fairly hard to do this on accident, but it does happen. Just place another stone nearby and they'll link up and be ready to go. That linking effect also impacts his talent too. As the stones link up, they gain increased damage and the ability to ignore enemy res. It says it stacks up to 3 times, but that sort of undersells things. Check this out. In this setup, you can see that when I link up 2 of these traps, it's just barely not enough to kill the enemy. A 3rd trap in a row makes it powerful enough to be an instant kill. But look at this. After the traps explode, these are no longer linked to 3 stones, but they're still an instant kill. The traps remember the maximum number of stones they've been connected to. You don't need to reinforce them after 2 have exploded. The stone itself also counts as 1, and as we just covered, the traps don't arm unless they have a second adjacent stone. So while the text says it stacks up to 3 times, it's actually not possible to get fewer than 2 stacks out of this talent. You will always ignore at least 18 res on his traps. Adding a 3rd stone in a row is all it takes to maximize the output. Note that it does have to be 3 in a straight line. Ordering 1 stone horizontally and 1 stone vertically does not give 3 stacks of the talent. As you might expect, Invisible enemies don't trigger traps while they're invisible, although if you strip their invisibility, all bets are off. And unlike other Trapmasters, all of Wang's traps are triggered by aerial enemies. Alright, that covers the core interaction mechanics of his traps. Let's dig into his skills. We'll start with S3 because it's by far the best one. There's a lot going on in the skill text here, let's take it one piece at a time. First up, what do the traps actually do? When S3 is equipped, the stones have this huge 2-tile range in all directions. If an enemy enters that range, it explodes, dealing 380% of attack as arts damage to all units inside that very large explosion area. Whether his skill is on or off, the traps will do that same amount of damage, with the only variable being whether you achieve 2 or 3 stacks of his talent. When you activate the skill, it adds 8 stones to his inventory, but without high potential, he can only actually carry 7. Any excess, usually at least 1, will get dropped within his modified 5x5 attack range. These are treated like talent stones, so they'll target enemies first and non-deployable tiles second, but randomly after that. Note that these aren't guaranteed to link with each other, so even if they place under an enemy, they may not activate. Wang stops attacking while the skill is active, but gets 20 ammo. You can still place his traps anywhere on the map, but if you place them inside his attack range, you get some bonuses. First, he can now place traps right on top of enemies, so you get to ignore all the rules about subtlety and just chuck explosives right at their heads. And second, instead of just placing 1 extra stone, he'll place up to 4 in all 4 tiles adjacent to the first stone. The first stone is free, that's just how his talent works, but each additional stone consumes 1 ammo, so you can consume up to 3 ammo for each stone you place. Stones won't be placed if the tile is impassable, if it already has a stone or another friendly unit, or if Wang is already at the limit of 9 talent stones on the map. The skill ends either when you manually deactivate it or when you run out of stones to place. At that point, all remaining ammo gets converted back into stones for you to place, although any excess above the limit of 7 will just disappear. 2 notes on how the stones explode. If you throw them down right in the middle of a pack of enemies, Wang will place all the bonus stones first, and then they will start exploding. This means you'll max out the impact of talent 2 before any of the explosions happen. The second note is that just because multiple stones are in range of enemies does not necessarily mean that all the stones will explode. If 1 explosion is enough to kill all the enemies in range, only 1 stone will explode. It's yet another way that you don't need to be smart or strategic about placing the stones. Just chuck them at the enemies till they stop moving. So, what are the strengths and strategies for using S3? The main strength is just how fast it can pump out damage. If you're dropping 5 stones at once as fast as you can, it's almost 10k raw arts damage per second for 14 seconds, with 36 res ignore. That's 75% more than Sakiko, except it hits all targets in a massive blast radius instead of 1 at a time. It's more than 2x what you get from Waynar. But if you use it that fast, you will consume all of Wang's ammo and stones in 14 seconds and he will have nothing but his basic attacks for another minute. A stone does the same damage whether you use it fast or slow. You actually get 20% more total damage if you go slower and reclaim his last 7 ammo as stones, because you get 7 more free stones from talent 1 that way. His total damage per skill cycle is not all that much more than Waynar, it's just that you can choose whether to burn it fast or slow. And you can use the skill differently in different levels. Against a boss, you can max out and try to melt them as fast as possible. Against waves, you can save the stones to use at the right moment to take out a pack of normal enemies in one shot. There's a weakness in this skill that you need to manage, especially if you're using Wang against waves. Stones will explode as soon as a target comes into range. If you throw down your traps ahead of time, then you tend to see something like this. A stone explodes the moment a single enemy comes into the edge of its range. Despite the huge blast radius, you only hit 1 enemy per trap, which is a real waste of their potential. If instead you throw the trap down once multiple enemies have spawned, you can hit far more targets. Being patient has a cost though. While his skill is active, it's not charging up for the next activation. The longer it lasts, the worse his uptime. So sometimes it's better to just throw down a few stones and burn a bit of ammo, then cancel his skill so it will be ready again when you need it. The other problem with the stone targeting is that they will explode for any valid target. Things like waste heat vents, crystal tiles, or Stainless's turret will all draw fire from the traps, whether you want them to or not. The large blast radius becomes problematic if you're trying to keep them from exploding too soon. While we're here, let's talk about masteries. How much does S3 benefit from masteries? Only 2 things change from level 7 to M3. The damage output climbs about 20%, and the charge time decreases from 54 to 50 seconds. That's surprisingly lackluster on this amazing skill. If he's your boss killing strategy, you should do it anyway, because an extra 20% where it counts is a big boost. But let's put it in perspective. Even at skill level 7, he can out-damage Moinar. How about skill 2 and skill 1? Are they worthwhile? Both S1 and S2 are more traditional Trapmaster type skills. The enemy has to step on top of the trap to activate it, so you have to be a lot more aware of the enemy's movements and think harder about where his talent will place the bonus stone. In general, you can place them right in front of an advancing enemy. The bonus trap will get placed right under them to trigger immediately, and it'll trigger the second one right after, if they're still alive. Both skills also don't get activated. Whenever they charge up, they add 2 more stones to your inventory if you have room. S1 actually deals the highest damage per stone of any skill, although it's the only one that only hits a single target. It slows the target for 6.5 seconds and deals damage over time for that duration. The slow can also increase the amount of time the target is in Wang's range for his normal attacks. One trick with the damage over time is that they have a decent chance of living long enough to step on your second stone, even if 1 stone would be enough to kill them. Unless you're in an environment where slow or damage over time are particularly valuable, I don't think this skill has a lot of viability. S2 has some potential. When stepped on, stones explode in a wide, horizontal or vertical burst, depending on whether they were linked horizontally or vertically with other stones. If both, it explodes both directions. It has a fat multiplier, dealing 580% of attack as arc damage, which is 5 to 6k damage, depending on his talent stacks. That's 50% more damage per trap than S3, and it also inflicts a 6-second slow. This one is good in almost the opposite way as S3. When you lay down traps ahead of time, S3 becomes really ineffective, because each explosion only hits 1 enemy. Since S2 waits for enemies to be right on top of it, it's a lot more likely that you'll hit multiple targets. Levels with long hallways synergize particularly well with the shape of its explosion, and of course it's not hard to guess which tiles the enemy will walk through. This one isn't as flashy as S3 and not as suitable for bosses, but it is quite effective. Its big weakness is that it generates traps fairly slowly, so the long-term DPS suffers versus S3 just because of a scarcity of traps. S2's masteries are also fairly minor. Like S3, it gains about 20% damage, and you have to take it all the way to M3 to gain 2 more minor benefits. 1 point reduction in SP, worth 6% more traps over time, and boosting the slow from 40% to 50%. Since S3 will probably see more playtime, I'm not sure if I could justify the resource cost of mastering this one. What are Wang's strengths and weaknesses? His strengths are pretty clear: massive peak DPS potential, large AoE attacks, and mostly global range. He's just straight up good at killing lots of things. On my video analyzing the best healer, someone astutely pointed out that you don't need healing if everything's dead. His large res ignore also makes him flexible where other arts attackers aren't. Remember those blood amber crystals from chapter 13? They have low HP but exceptional defensive. These are comically easy for Wang. High res just isn't a thing he pays attention to. This makes him one of the best units we've ever had for soloing levels, or carrying a weak team. That said, for all the things he's great at, he does have some notable weaknesses. For one, he's fragile. He has decent defense for a ranged unit, but 0 res and very low HP. So he's not quite as tanky as units like Perfumer, Platinum, or Amiya. Not as tanky as Amiya feels like words that have never before been spoken by anyone. Because his trap range doesn't depend much on his attack range, you can usually mitigate this by stuffing him in the back where he doesn't have to take any hits, and since he's cheap, you can get him low in the deployment order so someone else is a higher priority target. Second, Wang takes a bunch of DP. His initial deployment is cheap, but then you're spending 2 or 3 DP per stone throughout the whole battle to fuel his damage. The spin rate is a little dependent on just how you use his skill, but for S3 I'd estimate it around 28 DP every 70 seconds. That's 0.85 Myrtles of DP consumption. Basically, he burns as much DP as Myrtle produces. In a level where DP is tight, you have to bring a whole extra Vanguard to the team to fund Wang's damage. When he's soloing a level, that's fine, because what else are you going to spend it on? But in a tougher fight, or a level with diminished DP regeneration, his DP expenditure will be noticeable, and will stop you from putting other units on the board. Third, he's somewhat sensitive to the map and your unit formation. Traps can't be placed on tiles that already have friendly units on them, so he can't really throw damage down in the middle of where your other operators are. The more units you have on the field, the less room there is for traps. While Wang is great at soloing, he gets kind of annoyed when you try to use him with an actual team. And fourth, like many ranged units, he struggles with invisibility. You'll need some extra support if you want him to nuke invisible foes. These don't stop Wang from being an exceptional unit, but you do still have to be mindful about how and when you rely on him. Let's talk about Wang's module. The first level of his module decreases his trap cost from 3 DP to 2, and adds 5% to his base attack and therefore his damage. The second level has the biggest jump. It adds 2% more damage and res ignore for every stack of talent 2, so it's worth 18% more damage output. As usual, the third level is a smaller boost, taking that boost up to 25%. The breakpoint at level 2 is the most worth chasing, as amplifying his res ignore is one of the best ways to make him effective against all kinds of targets. For our final section, let's talk about buffs and debuffs. If you want to get the most out of Wang, what are the best units to pair him with? Wang doesn't really care that much about attack speed buffs, because his own attacks are such a small part of his damage. Consequently, he also doesn't mind attack speed debuffs, or things like cold, freeze, and stun. He can't activate his skill while frozen, but he can still blow things up. He's got such a large amount of res ignore that stacking him with a res debuffer is also not all that interesting. Unless the enemy has extremely high res, he doesn't have much trouble punching through it on his own. The two buffs that make the most difference to Wang are SP charge, or buffs to his base attack stat. Sora's S2 is interesting because it has a cycle time extremely similar to Wang's. She can add about 400 attack to him, resulting in a 56% higher burst during his skill. That's pretty huge. Since his DPS is so contingent on how many traps he can place, SP regen is also a big one. Lopsis, for instance, can get his S3 charging in 37 seconds instead of 50. That's around 23% more DPS over the long term, although with a similar increase in his DP consumption. She can also help keep him alive, which is not a bad thing. You can apply the same ideas if you're using Wang in integrated strategies. If you start with the Tactical Destruction Squad, you can have a promoted Wang from the first floor, and he can solo a huge chunk of the run. Target collectibles that add to SP regen or base attack, and he can grow astoundingly good. His global range and large explosions also make him absolute peak at defeating himself. That about covers things. I hope I gave you some info to help you get the most out of Wang. If you liked this video, please vote for it in the Dust Lifted video creation contest. My Silver Ash Deep Dive took home a 3rd tier prize in the Sunlit Peak contest, and I'm hoping this one can do the same or better. As always, please like and subscribe to support my channel and help it reach more viewers. I'll see you next time.